Hello, I'm Alastair McIntyre of Electric Scotland. I'd like to tell you about the flag. Basically, when you visit the Electric Scotland website, in our main menu, you'll see the menu item, the flag. And the flag is actually a separate domain now. It used to reside solely on Electric Scotland, but about a couple of years ago, it got registered under www.scotsindependent.org. But it's still very much a part of the site. It carries our common header throughout the site, and certainly I still consider it to be one of the major sections of Electric Scotland. The history of that is that way back when I was new to building the website, I was trying to get some modern stories about Scotland, and so I went to all the newspapers and asked them if any of them would like to contribute stuff to the site. None of them did. I then thought it'd be nice to maybe tell people about the political situation in Scotland. So I went to all the political parties and said, would you like to contribute anything to the site? No one did. So I think a little while later I was just browsing the web and I came across the Scots Independent newspaper, which I personally never heard of. So I read a couple of the articles that were on at this particular website and thought it was great, but clearly it had been a little bit in history because there was no new content up. So I made contact with the Scots Independent and we arranged a meeting, and Ken Fee, who was the then editor of the paper, was there along with Jim Lynch, and I think Peter Wright was there, who's the chairman of the paper. And we had a really good meeting, and in there I discovered that it's actually the oldest political newspaper in Scotland, having been formed, I think it was 1926. And I remember asking them about who bankrolled the paper, and I was amazed that they all fell around laughing. In actual fact, it's very much volunteers that run the newspaper, so there was no big bucks there at all. Anyway, as a result, they did say they would like to have an internet presence, and so with Jim Lynch and Peter Wright, we got talking, and we came up with the flag. And the flag is actually a weekly publication, and its aim is clearly to tell you about the politics in Scotland, merely from an independence point of view. But for the internet edition, we decided that, politics can be a bit boring and so forth. And so what we thought we'd try to do is to include also some of the culture of Scotland. And in fact, the remit of the paper is not only to fight for independence, but to promote the history and culture of Scotland. So in actual fact, it was a great fit. And so today, if you go to the flag, you'll usually always hit the newsletter of that particular week. Usually we always date it for Friday, but in practical terms it normally goes up on a Thursday evening. But there there's usually 4 contributors to the flag, one of which is Jim Lynch, of course. But essentially they will each tell you the political stories of that particular week in their own terms. We've got Richard Thompson, Alison Hunter is there, and Ian Hogg, I think? I might have that wrong. But anyway, they all have their own styles, so you can enjoy what they write each week. The second half of the flag is the cultural section, which is on the whole is done by Peter Wright and his wife Marilyn. In fact, his daughter now publishes the paper, because when I was over in Scotland a year or so ago, I trained her on how to publish to the site, and she's doing a brilliant job now. But in the cultural section, we built up over the years the Scots language in real audio, and I tell you, that's just an absolute marvellous triumph for the paper. I mean, so often you'll hear Scottish words that Robert Burns wrote and wonder what the heck that means. Well, if you go to the flag and you go to the Scots language section, you'll find a big glossary of Scottish words. And each word, the way they work it is when you click on the word, it'll give you they'll actually say the word to you in Scots, they'll give you the English translation of the word. Then they'll use a phrase using that word in Scots, and then they'll give you the English translation, and they'll finally give you the word one more time. So that way you really get to know what that word means and how to pronounce it. But in addition to all the words, they've done a lot of short poems, they've done stories, all in the Scots language, and it's just an absolutely unbelievable resource. It's certainly the largest audio library of Scots anywhere in the world. In fact, I can tell you a quick wee story that they did. One was written by Frank Young in Canada. He's a Scots Canadian, and he wrote a story of the Great Flood in the Scots vernacular. And Peter Wright, who's been doing all the recordings, read the story, and they got together, and Frank was happy for him to record it in real audio. So on the site you can actually read the story in print on the site, but at the same time listen to it being told. And the way it kind of goes is like God's coming through the trees this day looking for the one good man. He sees this old fella at his feet, and he basically says, "Oh, you don't need to kneel at my feet." And Noah comes back and says, "Oh, I'm not kneeling at anybody's feet. I'm looking for my spectacles." "Oh, here they are," he says, and he picks them up, puts them on, and stands up and says, "Oh, it's you, God. Nice to see you. Come away and have a cup of tea and meet the missus and the bairns." So, you know, it's basically a Scottish grandfather over visiting his son and his wife and the two wee granddaughters in Canada. And it's basically him telling the story of the Great Flood to the two wee granddaughters. It's actually a very charming story and well worth having a read at. But in addition to that, Peter does the cultural stuff, which usually gives you a cultural story, which ends with a recipe. They've got a Scot Wit section, which is basically some old Scots humour that Peter reads to you, so you can listen to it and read it. And just they do like famous sayings on the site. They do songs. I mean, there's a Cayley songbook there. There's a whole host of songs that meant something to Scots, basically, on the site. So a huge amount of information. And as we've been putting up each week's issues, of course, we've archived the material in its own sections. So you can actually go to the Scottish Songs section and look at all the songs that are available on there. It's just an absolutely wonderful resource. And of course, at the same time, it does educate you about the independence movement in Scotland, if that's something that you're interested in. They obviously hope by putting such great cultural stuff up that you might at least read a wee bit about the independence bit, when you go to the site. But in fact, some of the stories that come up in the politics section is quite amazing and very interesting indeed. So there you have the flag. I think you'll enjoy the read every week. As I say, it always goes out usually on a Thursday night or at the very latest on the Friday. So you can guarantee by Friday the paper is going to be up there for you to read. And of course, every time you click the flag on the Friday, you'll get the very latest issue coming out. And so there you have it, the flag in the wind. Thank you.